Good morning, everyone. Good morning, panelists. Just before we started, we do a quick intro, just so that we get a little bit of background on who do we have here. And then we're going to dive into some topics, hopefully topics that you will find engaging. And our ideal is that this conversation brings either a question or an idea for you to bring about later on. So if we have time, we'll probably talk a little bit about that. I have maybe a go at a question before we wrap. And if you do come up with any idea, you want to talk to any of us afterwards, feel free to come and check in. So first off, here to my left, I have Margaret, and she's the lead scientist at Darktrace on AI. And give me 1 second. And I had Greg Lewis at Stellar Cyber, and Patrick, field CISO at Torq. Everybody involved in different areas of research, solving different challenges in the automation and all the problems that we're facing today with the convergence of technologies and challenges that we're trying to address in the space. So with that being said, we'll probably get started. I'll start with you, Margaret. First topic in mind about your research and where we stand today, the problems that we're trying to solve. Tell us a little bit about what, from your perspective, what these problems really are and how do you see solving these challenges?
I think a lot about what we don't know and how much uncertainty everybody has all day, every day. And to me, that type of inability to understand exactly what the day-to-day landscape looks like, what might be coming next, turns into its own additional chore. And we already had a lot of things to do. So managing that type of complexity in a way that a normal human can do it is becoming increasingly challenging. And I'm a huge AI fan because I believe that the way that we can bolster human performance is by creating these partnerships with AI, but we really need to understand it.
Yeah, responsibly.
Yeah.
I think what keeps me up at night is, again, the unknown unknowns with AI and the fact that we're building all this cool new technology on top of infrastructure that's still 20, 30, 40 years old at this point. You're still using...
Don't tell people that.
You're still using DNS. You're still using TCP IP, right? HTTP. All these things are built on these old protocols, and you're introducing this complexity, right, to try and solve these problems at a faster rate. We heard the development of vulnerabilities and the attackers using AI to build those attack tools. So we have to build AI and automation to defend these networks.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, to add to the challenge, right, that organizations, that leaders are faced with is understanding where to start. And when it comes to the introduction of AI, agentic AI in particular, it's how is it going to be used within the application stack, right? Where are we going to focus? Is it going to be behind the scenes where we have to innately trust, right, what's happening? No hallucinations, right? Or do we bring it forward to more of a virtual employee, right? Where we're able to govern and have standards around rules of engagement that can be tangible for organizations. So we need to look at it from both sides of the spectrum. So I think the biggest question and challenge is, where do you start? Do you assume that things are going to be running behind the scenes and you have to develop this innate trust within your organization? Or do we maybe find an earlier adoption in the front where we can monitor, and the eventuality is it runs as software right behind the scenes?
So that opens up another page to this whole dilemma. Because normally we focus on technology, and we focus on solving those immediate problems that are right about technology and how we apply technology. But now this is expanding into the human dimension too, and how are we going to do that? So some of the undertones I heard first were about collaboration and facilitating how all these technologies integrate. Everybody's well aware of how many hundreds or thousands of different vendors and different technologies exist out there to solve the problems that we have, which is a great conundrum for anybody trying to make a decision. What do I do? Which one we use? And if I use this one, can I use that one? And if I invest in this, do I invest in the other one? So perhaps we could navigate a little bit on how that looks like, and then circle back toward this whole impact in the human space. what does it mean to the human of the future if we're starting today thinking we're going to be employing machines to do certain type of work, and why should that be?
That was a lot of questions. I think there were multiple pages in that book, but I'll go there. I'm going to out myself as an absolute psychology nerd. I have a Ph.D. in applied experimental psychology. My expertise is cognitive science, memory, attention, and I've somehow drifted into the world of cybersecurity and AI. And ultimately, all of these options, all of the integrations, all of these choices are wonderful until it becomes too difficult to make a choice. You have decision fatigue, and you don't do anything. And right now, part of that uncertainty, the ambiguity, is that I'm seeing people who desperately need help with the enormous rise of CVEs. Last year, there were over 40,000 CVEs, and that is over 15% of all CVEs last year. Granted, not all of them are exploited, but the sheer number of these things means that we need help. The options are so numerous, it's hard to make a choice. What device do you trust? What product do you trust? Where do you want to put it? How can we depend on it? And all of a sudden, people do nothing. And my biggest fear is that we do nothing for too long.
Yeah, and then you'll be left behind. I think two things on that note. Trust is an important word. And we have to build systems that we can, at least, even if they're black box models, at least we have guardrails on them. And we can trust them to do the things that we tell them to do, not things that they're not supposed to do. Having AI governance in enterprises, organizations, really taking a hard look at what you're implementing as far as AI is concerned, because every vendor out there, every vendor on that floor has an AI thing in their product. And they're going to want to either sell you on it or build it in and release it without maybe even telling you.
With your data.
Yeah.
With your data.
Hopefully, they'll tell you that they're going to use their data. Sometimes they don't. So number one, guardrails. Number two, as far as the human experience is concerned, my experience is in the SOC. I have 25 years in security operations, and it always has been a struggle, right? False positives, burnout, shift work. It's very difficult work. And I use for folks who follow Marvel and comic books, Iron Man, right? Tony Stark is a normal guy, but you put the Iron Man suit on him, give him Jarvis AI, and he's augmented, right? So I like to think of it as we're going to augment humans to be able to handle all that data, all the deluge of things that are coming at them, both at their work and in their daily lives.
Yeah. And I think to trigger off the element around Iron Man, I also am a little bit more familiar with kind of the security operations world. I think at the end of the day, the biggest inherent risk is burnout, right? Within the industry itself, there's been burnout for years. It's only continued to expand. So it's trying to get back to that center equilibrium, right? Around balancing the right use of your people with technology. But at the end of the day, the guardrails are paramount. So it's back to basics in essence, right? Nothing is changing fundamentally where you need to have your identity and your policies in place. You need someone that's governing those and monitoring them from an auditability perspective. So transparency is also key. But I don't think any of that's possible without kind of a partnership ecosystem around you. So making sure that also all of your inherent vendors, they work with one another. Their technologies integrate with one another and are passing the appropriate data. So I think as an industry, that's something that we've genuinely struggled with, right? Because everyone believes that their IP is so unique to them. And of course it is to an extent, right? But in many cases it's not. And I think there needs to be a little bit more acknowledgement of that within the vendor community to empower, right, our partners and our customers to be more successful. So I think that's an area that falls on our side of the fence, but it's super critical long term.
So I would say that maybe taking an angle of being more optimistic than anything else and looking into the future from the consumer side of things. Say I'm using the products and I'm trying to put myself on the place of everybody trying to consume the solutions that we all create. Ultimately, we're trying to solve a problem, right? And we want to trust that the solution that is offered, is presented, actually solve the problem. And that, if that premise is fulfilled, then we're good to go on from there. So after that, then we can establish that there is hope for vendors to establish a collaboration that would enable sharing across or enablement of complementing technologies for things. And that would be a hopeful future, so we don't have to antagonize when choosing what solution and how to build a stack, what works with what, because it adds a lot of complexity. So when we think about the consumer, is going through those challenges too. So everybody has a great product, but would it all play together, right? And then on the last tail of that, to keep on these topics, I also don't want to install fear when we talk about these things. There's a lot of that sometimes going on, and some people enjoy the conversation. But staying optimistic about that future, that outlook, I want us to consider the scenario where the volume of information, the complexity of the problem that we're trying to solve is so huge, as it had been already for a while, that humans cannot tackle this on our own. With our brains, with our eyes, with the hours of the day that we have, we won't be able to solve it. So we need to rely on something, and that something is technology itself. That comes nowadays in the form of artificial intelligence in whichever flavor that comes to apply to it. So the outlook for the future, vendor collaboration, accepting AI as the technology that helps us accelerate solutioning for all these problems. So what else can we add to that, looking to the future, that would give us more of a, maybe, happy colors to what's to come? What do you guys take on that?
Okay. This is a
Cybersecurity people aren't
no.
normally positive about these.
I know.
No,
Bad things happen all the time.
I actually
Yes.
give a talk called From FUD to Flourish.
All right.
And it is all about the positivity. And I've worked in a lot of domains where the entire point of my career was figuring out what was going to go wrong. Pathology. Where's the problem? How can we fix it? What's the symptom? Where's the Band-Aid? And I love that. But you do that for long enough and you've seen some really odd things over the course of 15 or 20 years. And people ask me, why are you in a good mood? Why are you happy? That makes no sense. And what they don't know is that I'm a statistician. So since I've seen all of the ways that things should go wrong, most things are actually not as bad as they should be. And we're very bad at capturing the resilience of a system. We undercount the way things go. And I think that as people who work towards integrations, people who understand the importance of working together for a very difficult problem, we have to look towards using our data to reveal hidden resilience and focus on those pockets of positivity. Why is that working so well with the same resource? I don't know. Dig in, look there, because you can scale that. Just like something bad is infectious, something good can be infectious, and you should look for it.
I agree with that, and I think if we look at healthcare, for example, you talked about the amount of data is just too much, right? Healthcare is solving problems with AI that humans couldn't do, even with consortiums and educational systems collaborating together. The AI can look at vast amounts of data, imaging data and medical records, things like that, to solve problems that even collective humans couldn't do in the past. And I think we'll start seeing that with cybersecurity. I started with how fragile our internet infrastructure is because it's based on these old protocols, but to your point, it does work, right? We take the internet for granted now.
Something's still working.
Yeah, it's a
find
commodity at this point, right? You expect you connect to Wi-Fi and you have the internet, right? So the stuff does work. It's just a little bit too fragile. And I think with AI's help, we can make it more resilient.
Right, correct.
So I think the interesting thing about the outlook and being optimistic is that if we actually rewind about 80 years, right, Alan Turing, the concept of the universal machine is still ultimately what we're seeking, right, through AI and adoption at current state. And I think the biggest difference is just the problems that we're trying to solve, right? So the theory still holds true, which is encouraging, right? Nothing has really changed on the premise of having this ultimate device or supercomputer, if you will, that will be able to solve everything in an enterprise. I think that the problems are just moving very quickly in the industry, and that's introduced by new technologies from vendors like us, right? People doing different things. So I believe it's a time now more so than ever to be optimistic because of the speed at which we can move today versus historically, and the new GPUs, and thanks NVIDIA, right, quite a bit, for allowing us to do things that weren't once conceivable. So I think the net of it is the problem is still remaining with the same question. It's just how are we solving it? How are we collaborating? And I think the fact that we can move at machine speed already is super encouraging, right? So we're going to continue to expand. I think it's at a 4x multiple year over year on compute power. Being able to solve those complex problems faster is only going to continue to accelerate.
Okay. All right. I like the music. This is good. We're not doomsday announcers.
Not yet. Sorry. There's a few more minutes, I'm sure.
We can go there.
So it's entirely up to you,
It's
and I'm going to give you that option
It's-
right now. So I just want to circle back to this notion of speed and volume, because this is important. And in the same framing as before, not thinking that it's a bad thing, but acknowledging the reality that we're operating in. The volume of information, the velocity of things, right? The acceleration that is happening continuously on the industry, that has an impact. And this is a cascading effect that translates to how we experience life itself. All the way from creating a processor that is capable of handling a certain amount of data and processing to having Alexa at home doing certain things. Funny stuff, right? So this acceleration impacts everywhere, not only on the enterprise, but also at the personal level as well. Taking on this, going whichever way you want to go, I'll start with you, Greg. Tell us briefly your passion. Where does it go? What's in your heart that you see for the future, AI, technology? Where are we going? Just hit us with whatever you want.
Great question. So I am of the belief that inherently we don't trust people, right? We don't trust ourselves often, right? So as a result, there's inherent lack of trust in technology. There's always doubt, especially cybersecurity, right? There's a lot of fluff, a lot of architecture, and it's failed users, and ultimately that's where a lot of that has come from. So I think that as we look ahead, we look forwards, it's really virtual employees, right? I think is the next step of the equation, and something likely to be seen in the next 12 to 18 months. So it's not how do we use them in our organization, but it's how do we identify them? Do we identify them as we do a typical user today? Are they assigned a Slack account, an email?
Hold it there.
Pause? Okay.
Pause it for a moment, okay? So we're going with you, virtual humans, so to speak, okay? Hold that there because I want to circle back. What do you think about this? What's your future, your passion?
My study is definitely not in the psychology realm of things, so I don't know how people think, but I do know machines, and I think very soon we're going to be able to trust AI to build secure code and look at code to be more secure. You mentioned CVE. We saw the talk before about all the vulnerabilities being identified and exploits being developed. It might turn into an arms race, but I think fundamentally, if we can trust machines and trust the code that they're running and the hardware they're running inherently, and it's provable with mathematics, it's provable with computer science, then it'll be a more safe and secure world for generations to come, and we can focus on what makes us happy as humans.
All right, so far we got better code, better machines, more trusting, right, technology, probably technology replacing some boring aspects that we don't want humans.
Augment.
Right, augmentation. So what's your take? What hits you with passion for this future? What do you predict?
I think a lot about AI natives, children, people who have had it forever. And I think very deeply about not just trust. Yes, I'm going to trust this. But under trust and over trust, I think they're totally different things. And it will become increasingly difficult to navigate what to trust more or less. And I also think we'll have quite a bit of a divide on people who have always had AI versus not, just like other types of technology that we've seen. I'm mostly optimistic.
Okay.
But I do think that there's an opportunity for this to create somewhat of a digital divide in the tools that people have access to, the tools that they use, and the impact that it can have on adoption. So who's going to go there and who's not? Who's going to put the tool in and who's not? And we'll see. But I do think there will be some component of a divide and a lot of nuance in over-trusting some of the systems.
Okay, so we're going to have to polish the trusting mechanisms for that future. Hopefully we're going to bring better things into it, technology-wise, and we may accelerate the processes by using some of that stuff. So I'm not sure how much time we got left, but do you guys want to open up and maybe take a question from the audience? Does that work? You guys good? Can we do that? Yes? Okay, so anybody wants to be first? Okay, there's a mic, I think, coming your way so that everybody can...
Oh.
We need one on the other side.
So this question's for the panel, specifically Ms. Cunningham. I've been following your product since 2017. During that time, I've been the CISO at 2 large financial institutions. Typically, you come in and you do some type of 90-day gap assessment, figure out where gaps are within the organization. Then you have to go identify technologies that will solve some of those issues or change the security levels there. Then from there, you have to budget for it. Then you got to wait for the next fiscal calendar to use those funds. And then you have to implement. And now, maybe a year and a half later, you're solving a problem you found in the first 90 days. How do you accelerate that with your executives, your stakeholders? Meanwhile, in that time, you'll have watched the organization spend $500,000 on a third or fourth party data breach. And following that, all the expenses with the attorneys and mailings and credit monitoring that you offer, your customer base is becoming so desensitized that 2 to 3% of those affected even sign up for those protections. And I see this cycle happening over and over again. I'm just curious from you leaders, especially having to be in the sales role and closing and things like that, how do you shorten that time frame to have a real impact when you're out in the field on the defensive side? Thank you.
Margaret, organize your thoughts. Give me a moment. Sorry. What's your name again?
Shane Rowland?
Shane?
Yes.
All right. So great question. She's going to address that in a moment. But I want to bring something to light before we do that. While we're talking about next generation stuff and future and what it predicts and all that stuff, there's one thing that we neglected to mention. We're in a world that is not stopping and is not a single lane. We have thousands of problems that are hitting us at the same time. And part of what he mentioned has to do with a lot of the other problems that we have. The processes, the financials, let alone the technology and their own cycles in there. But these are organizational problems. These are human problems, not necessarily technology problems. Okay? So with that,
I'm not in sales, so I don't know if I can fix sales cycles. I'm a terrible salesperson. I'm sorry, don't tell my company. But that said, I have been on the other side, and I've been in purchasing positions, and I feel your pain. There is so much minutia, and it's very rare that the people in the room have a shared mental model of the problem. They all have different priorities and motivations. You may have a new CISO who's obsessed with a product and a framework, and 2 years later you've got a new one and the strategy changes. And ultimately, no one's really sure what the product market landscape looks like because there's 85 new products every other minute. So I am a fan of, I like to call it ruthless scope. So really taking that time to look and say, it's 3 things, not 30 things, and attack it with no mercy so that when you have these conversations, you're talking about 3 things. You're not talking about all of the things because all of the things matter, but you'll never get anything done. And so navigating the procurement, the sales, the security team, the engineers, who's going to own it, who's going to deploy it, who's doing the integration, where does the signal go, is my team big enough? You got to get there at some point, But if that's the thing that's taking people a year to get a solution in place that's exposing data, damaging their brand, increasing risk, that inaction is a real cost. I think talking about the cost of inaction can be a catalyst for moving things more quickly. I successfully did a bake-off and purchase in fintech in 3 months, looking at 3 different products, because I was pig-headed about it. And I bothered everyone, every day.
Thank you.
All right, thank you for that. You guys want to take on that?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think the approach that worked for me as a buyer to skirt those, a couple of things. Creating a sense of urgency with the C-suite and the board, not just the technologists in the room, I think is number one. And to piggyback on that, focusing on business value and not just the fear of hurting your brand. While there's a quantifiable cost to that, if you are a business partner to the rest of the company or the organization, then it becomes a lot easier to free up that budget and make that cycle move faster. So a sense of urgency and providing business value that's not just based on potential risk or actual breaches that happened, right? But providing value to the business. You're gonna have faster mean time to detect. You're gonna have a better morale in your SOC. You're gonna have all of the tangible and intangible things that you can use to create a sense of urgency in the business.
All right, so great. Like 30 seconds, because
You got it. So I agree with everything that they both said. I'll take it more from the sales perspective, right? And what we've actually worked with partners and customers on in the past is, unfortunately, deprioritizing something that might already be in the environment, right? Because that risk analysis is ultimately going to drive the business decision, but including your team in that decision as well, right? So getting them to be on board with maybe sunsetting a product that is working, you have it, but this other problem is ultimately more important to the organization.
Thank you. So one last thought on this. Remember your partners too, because there are challenges that they are equipped to solve and come in and help shorten the gaps between different solutions, between the time of integration, and making a great return on the investments that you make. So that could also be part of that equation in solving this problem. So keep that in mind as well. With that, thank you guys for the conversation. Thank you. We would have taken more questions, but we got to run. So.